Hello, my name is Parker,
And my name is Ned.
and this is the Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 16. We're recording on June 2nd. The Acolyte premieres in 2 days. Ned, I know you are counting down.
I love television.
Ned, you love television so much. Do you know what my two most love-hate foods are, Ned?
I feel like a bad friend, and I can't say that I do. I can't say that I do.
No, because I never go out to them with you, because I suspect that for very similar and yet totally different reasons, you and I have nothing in common with food. We have the same love-hate relationship. It is
All right.
sushi and tapas,
Yes.
because I love both those foods. They are delicious. Spanish food, like Spanish food, is amazing. Sushi, especially good sushi, is amazing. And small plates for a 6'6" guy, that is not a meal. Like, right? Like by the time I get to the meal portion of tapas, you know, it's like $9 for one donut. I went to I remember like the first time out of college going to Tasty and Sons.
Yeah.
And I got hyped up, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm going to Tasty and Sons. Yeah, like I'm an adult. Like I've got the money, and like I go to and I'm like, ooh, donuts, and it's like 2 donuts, $14, and like it's just a basic donut that they drizzle a little honey on, and I was like,
No.
and every dish on the menu was like that. It was like 3 bites for $12, and they were amazing. They were delicious, so good. But it's like $100, $200 for dinner, easy. And so, anyways, the reason why I bring that up is because that is the theme of tonight's episode. Ned and I have gone through our list of topics that we thought, hey, this might merit an episode, and decided here's a couple that absolutely do not. There is Ned and I run on, but there's no way we're going to talk about these topics for 30 minutes. But we could talk about them for 4 to 5 minutes. And so that's what we're going to do. It's just a little small plate tapas night. We're going to go through topics. But before we get to that, as always, Ned, this is one of our last Spark of Rebellion pre-episode matches.
Yep.
I think this is anti-penultimate. Their $64 word. Our anti-penultimate Spark of Rebellion match. Why don't you tell us about your key takeaway?
Well, so I was playing
Grand
Inquisitor. Yes. So I was playing Grand Inquisitor Blue, and you were playing Luke Green. I piloted my Grand Inquisitor Blue at our local back on Thursday to reasonably good success. I had been training a lot. I'd been practicing a lot with Grand Inquisitor Yellow, and I got a wild hair at some point, and I'm just like, this doesn't feel great. This feels, there's a bunch of good stuff, but it's not really meshing together. And I switched over to playing this very basic Grand Inquisitor Blue list that I felt like had no originality. It was just like, what cards work well with Grand Inquisitor? Let's throw them in a deck. And what cards are just good, because a bunch of cards don't work with Grand Inquisitor, but they're good anyway, and you put them in the deck. And lo and behold, it performed pretty well, both in testing and in the real event. And I think that I showed that by taking down game 1 against Luke. You obviously are the control in the matchup, but you mostly stabilized, and I was still able to squeak out game 1. And then game 2, like, it was a lot closer than I think it should have been.
No, I think with proper sideboarding, I think Luke's slightly favored in that matchup.
I would agree.
I was playing. I spent all week considering playing Chirrut, since everybody's talking about how he's dead. Post once Shadows releases. We'll see if that's true. But I was like, hey, might as well get him while the getting's good. But I didn't have a chance to get the lines in this week, so I went with the deck I know and love, blue green heroism. There it is. And my 2 takeaways from the match are: 1, I just love how so many people, when Alliance Dispatcher was previewed, ruled out Alliance Dispatcher. They're like, he's garbage and maybe borderline playable in Luke. And he's garbage outside of Luke, but he's actually quite good in Luke.
Oh yeah,
and you know, you only need to really get one value, and then he's just a free 1/2 body who maybe sticks around, you know, forever. And
yeah.
so that's my takeaway one. This is why we don't do preview reviews on this channel, is because, I mean, that's free content that we're passing up, Ned. We could do them, and then we get to make another episode about how we were wrong, and you know, then that's a
Can I do like
right?
the YouTube thumbnail face?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My other key takeaway is I am done with Spark of Rebellion. I mean, it's a good set. That's not critical. Yep. It's just, and that's not even a hype thing. That is, I have explored the topography.
We have played a lot of Spark of Rebellion.
Yeah, and again, Josh Massey set one set meta is not super interesting, and it's good.
It's not
Space
stale
Arena, Ground Arena,
necessarily,
Banana.
but yeah.
What?
It's not stale necessarily. It's just like
no. It's absolutely not a stale meta.
Yeah.
It's just I know what decks I want to play, and I know how to play them against the decks that I don't want to play.
Yeah.
And the game's still really good, and I enjoy those matches. But when I was at my locals, like the biggest surprise I saw at all on Thursday night was that there was a Boba Blue deck, and I was like, oh. And that's not super novel,
right?
But I was like, that's the level of novelty we're squeaking out of the game. But let's get in. Hey, this is turning into its own small plate. But let's get into our small plates. And if you don't care about our topics, there is math at the end. So
oh yes,
you know there is a there is an actual entree. You leave the Tapas restaurant, you're sad because you just spent $80 and you're still not hungry. And I'll use Ned's favorite example. And then at the end, there's Taco Bell, right? There's a stop on the way home where you're like, nope, the fancy expensive food didn't cut it. There are 2 gorditas and a crunchy shell taco at the end of the episode. But first, small plates. I'll go first. What is the deal with Galactic Ambition? Or more specifically, Ned, do you think there's any potential for that card to be playable without cheating? And by cheating, I mean pay it for 7.
Yeah.
Your base takes the damage as advertised on the card.
Here are the 2 cases that I could see that being reasonable. Number 1, there is a card that costs, I think, on the order of like 15 that is basically reads win the game, right? Where instead the deck, it turns into, can I hold my base health at a high enough level that I can play Galactic Ambition and not immediately die, right?
So something like, you know, Sentinel untargetable, wipe the opponent's board. Okay, sure.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Or like it's the Death Star, and if you attack with it, you win. And the whole game turns into like, let's get up to 7, let's ramp as fast as we can to 7 while still keeping our health above some point, and then play it. I mean, so that's like case 1. And that's a real fragile case, right? That's an extremely fragile case. Case 2 is there is a deck that wants very low base health. Right, there is some kind of an effect that cares a lot about having very low base health. I'm talking beyond like You're My Only Hope. I'm talking beyond that, those kind of like
Gorilla Pod.
Nice little incidental effects, but something where like if you, to use like a Magic analogy, something like the Death Shadow deck, where you are trying to get your health as low as possible while not dying because it turns all of your creatures into these giant monsters, right? Or the creatures that you care about. Right, yeah.
So there's some thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. So
off. Yeah.
Even without cheating, it requires such strong context.
Yeah.
So okay.
I'm not. I mean, there's a reason it's not seeing a lot of play. Like they're 7 cost events are hard even when they put a body into play, right? Like U-Wing, I think that's effectively just a couple bodies on a stick. Right. Yeah.
I think I absolutely agree with you. They've talked a bit about the devs that this is, it's a staple effect. So
sure.
And they've got a plan around it in the future. So that implies they're considering it and concerning, okay. I was just everybody talks about that card from a standpoint of shield your base or like play a unit that heals a ton, right?
I mean,
like,
I guess I don't know. Like I'm just yeah. No, it's not. It doesn't feel good. But I mean,
so
I remain to be proven wrong. My
sure.
play.
I mean, blue is. I could imagine that villainy. It would not be crazy to think that villainy gets a card like redemption,
Yeah,
right? So that immediately can heal the damage done,
sure.
and now
But
you're
you're
left
still
with
paying
some
7.
weird body.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Then you're paying
still paying
7 for Garbo.
and a card, right? Like
Yeah, no, 2 cards,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
yeah.
okay.
My turn. Round timers are too short for best of 3. I don't feel like I'm a slow player. I really don't. But every time I go to a game 3, even when I'm playing like an aggro-y mid-range deck, if I'm not playing like the absolute most aggro-y deck, the clock is a factor, and I don't like that.
I completely agree. I don't know how. I mean, I understand the devs have like lived in the game, but I've seen
Yeah.
the non-devs play on stream.
Yeah.
Like I've seen how long it takes the people who aren't Tyler, Jeremy, Danny. I've seen how long it takes them to play, and they've got to be feeling the crunch. On Thursday night when I looked over and you're the one holding up the round 1 by going to time, I'm like, you're on Grand Inquisitor. How are you going to time?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like I am not. You have played against me. I am not a slow player.
That is not a knock on you. That is just
Yeah.
sometimes. I mean, even when you're fast, you get to a point in a lot of games where you're like, this is the pivot turn.
Right.
This is
You
the
just
make or
gotta
break
think.
it turn.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take 2 minutes. And I
Even
agree.
like 5 more minutes in the round would really, I think, help. And I understand that there's like lots of knock-on effects if you're going to be running like a big tournament. 5 minutes every round, it adds up. But
you're doing 10 rounds. That's another hour. And people
Yeah.
want to get home. And especially, over on the East Coast where their cities are borderline in proximity to each other. And you read about people who are like, and then I had a 2.5 hour drive home. So I like, do you know what's in 2.5 hours of Portland? Nothing. There's Eugene, right? Like, maybe if you hit no traffic, there's Bend. We have no cities within 2.5 hours. Our nearest like big city doing a tournament is Seattle. That's 4 hours if you're lucky.
Yeah. And
So I get it. Seattle,
Yeah.
there's people want to go home, whereas we're never more than 40 minutes from home. But it was 55 minutes is too short, especially when they're just jamming the games. So there's no bath. There's like literally the moment one person is done, they're like, your new pairings are up. Get cracking.
Go. Yeah.
Sideboard back. You got to reset your sideboard.
Yeah.
You
got to move your playmat. Like if you've got your bag of stuff, you have to like shuffle around the.
I don't know. Maybe
spaced
other
tables.
people's card game shops are real spread out warehouses. But the 3 now that I've played at, those seats are back to back, and so you're like, trying to get through with your playmat and your backpack, and no, absolutely not.
I imagine as a larger gentleman, like that's really really a tight fit.
It is a tight fit, but it's just all of it. I'm not fast. Like I'm not a fast person. Like physically, I'm a dinosaur lumbering around all the time, and I just don't react to things quickly. I hate 55 minutes. It's basically I'm a blue player through and through, but I can't play control. Like there's no time. There's absolutely no time to play control in this game, and it's weird because it has that knock-on effect of like skewing the meta. Like clearly there are good control decks that are doing well. People are taking blue Vader, both in multiple versions of Iden and taking tournaments, but like a lot of people aren't. It's hard to get those lines in at your locals. You're playing someone who's never seen your deck, and your deck is just no, and new topic.
Yes,
This is exciting for me because I have math. This is Ned's purview, but this is episode number 16. That's power 2. That is a magical, powerful number. Powers of 2. I don't know. My understanding is that they're big numbers. Maybe that's the computer scientist in me, but they're magical numbers. So I have also brought math, and my question is Shadows of the Galaxy? It felt wordier. Is it wordier than Spark of Rebellion? And it's possible that Fantasy Flight is hiding a whole bunch of vanilla cards, vanilla previews that they haven't released yet. Just a whole bunch of bodies that do nothing, just big old blank text boxes. But as of this morning, Sunday, June 2nd, so all the cards we saw through Friday, yes, Shadows of the Galaxy is wordier to the tune of about 1.5 words per card, looking only at main deck cards, so not looking at leaders. I also took out bases just because the rare bases only exist in Spark of Rebellion, and that skews the math. Took out tokens. So just looking at main deck cards previewed so far, Spark of Rebellion has an average of 14.91 words per card. That is the average number of words on a card. Shadows so far is at 16.4 words per card. So, I mean, that's like 10%, which I don't know how.
It depends on what your standard deviation is. So that was the note that I was going to give is if you have the standard deviations, we can do like a t-test.
I don't. I just averaged. That's it. So just, dude, this is the most math I've done on this show. You got to give it to me.
Kudos. This is good.
But we'll come back.
Yeah.
I'll get my own one sentence mini Monday we'll follow up and look at the standard deviation. But I felt like, hey, it's an extra. I mean, even if that's all grouped, right? Like even if all the set 1 cards were 15 words.
Yeah.
And all of the set 2 cards were
16 to 17
16
words. Yeah.
17 words. That's still 1 to 2 words more, right? Like, however you spread out. The average has gone up. I don't know if that's how significantly.
Is it meaningful or not? We get to find out. That's what statistics is for.
But there are more words in Shadows than there are in Spark of Rebellion based on the previews we have so far.
Yes.
I found that fascinating. I was excited to do math because it definitely feels like we're getting... I'm blanking, but we just had the card that had to wedge 2 keywords onto 1 line.
Oh, yeah, Darth Maul. Darth Maul, wasn't it? Where it was ambush
Darth
and
Maul,
overwhelm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is our first time we've seen a comma in red. Don't ask me how I know that. And I just think those like magic legendaries that have like 9, they're always in white, that have like 9 keywords.
Yeah.
And we're getting there. We're now at 2 on 1 line. And I found that fascinating.
Looking forward to the Sentinel Overwhelm Sentinel Overwhelm Ambush Restore 3 legendary that we see in a couple of sets from here.
It's coming. It's coming.
My next topic. What is the mechanical theme for Hero Yellow? So this is just me being me, and maybe I
don't know, Ned.
Maybe I'm dumb, right? Like I fully hold out that I am overlooking things. But in most of the other color pairings, there is a very clear mechanical theme. So like, let's look at Villain Yellow.
So we assume there are 8 color pairings.
There are 8 color pairings, right? So let's look at, like, Villain Yellow has this event something. Sometimes there's more than one. So like Heroism Blue has like a Sentinel sub theme and then like a Force user sub theme. We've got lots of good Force users and then some things that go on the Force users. Villainy Red has kind of like a mechanical sub theme of just aggressive cards.
Are you asking
direct damage?
Is your question what is the mechanical theme for Hero Yellow in Spark of Rebellion or broader?
Yeah, in Spark of Rebellion specifically. Like Shadows, I'm going to put Shadows to one side. I haven't seen enough Shadows cards. You have to look at the whole. I feel like in general, one must look at the set to appreciate. But let's go through things that I thought of might be themes. There's like kind of a play
for
lots
Hero
of cards
Yellow.
theme. Right. There's a play lots of cards theme where like, okay, well, Bamboozle you can get in for free. Vanguard Ace keys off of playing lots of cards in a turn. Leia lets you untap resource or ready resources, and then Lothal Insurgent keys off of you playing 2 cards in a turn. Right. But there's not enough there. Like Vanguard Ace isn't a good enough payoff for it to be worth it. Right. Like, okay, I played, a whole bunch of cards and I get out my Vanguard Ace and I burn my whole hand.
4/4.
Yeah. Woo.
Yeah.
Is it hand attack, right? Like you're trying to attack your opponent's hand. Spark of Rebellion is a really good card. You see a lot of it. You've got Lothal Insurgent. That's also like a hand attack card, but like there's not enough there to really do anything with. Like you're not keying off like Force Throw or something else where we're in there where you're like trying to trim down your opponent's hand to certain cards and get rid of them. I could see that, but there's not enough there. There's like a resource manipulation sub-theme where you've got Han, Leia, Lando, and the Falcon where they're all like caring about your resource row, but like they care about the resource row, but they're not doing a lot, right? Like Lando is the big payoff for like resource row manipulation, but I have tried to make Lando work before, and I have never felt like strongly enthusiastic about Lando. Yeah,
I feel very confident now that they kind of alluded to the idea that there were cards in set 1 that don't really come into their own until set 2. That
sure.
They're just, some of these cards get pulled forward or whatever because you got to have Lando in set 1,
right.
but we've designed Lando or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I feel very confident. I could be wrong that we're not going to get. We got Lando leader.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to get another Lando, like a second Lando unit in Shadows. His unit from Shadows gets pulled forward to spark a rebellion because you got to have a Lando.
Right.
But I mean, his card makes so much more sense in Smuggle.
Yes. Yeah.
But like it doesn't make sense in Spark Rebellion. So I will defend Lando. But again, you're right. What's the theme?
What's the theme? Like give me a mechanical hat to hang off of or make the payoffs better, right? Like if Vanguard Ace had a better rate, right? Like instead of 1 experience token, it was like 2 experience tokens or something. Or the Falcon and Han have really great synergy, but then you've got Jin, who's got like reduced power on attack, which is good and is like a mid-range.
I'm going to defend Vanguard Ace.
Mid-range cards. What?
I'm going to go on the record, and who am I? I'm not very good at this game, but
sure.
I'm going to go on the defend Vanguard Ace, and I'll tell you why. Ryan, when he was on our show, said that they're cards that are bad now but are good later.
Sure.
Vanguard Ace, I think, keys off of the creation of tokens, right?
Yes.
Tokens, the least experience in Shield are played, right? You play, I feel like it was a card that was pulled forward just so that we get a little bit of that future stuff, right? Like that there's, here's the Resistance, here's the New Republic, here's, same way that Mason, I can easily see some set 3 cards where you play a unit and play a B1 droid. Play 2 of those. You've just played 4 cards. They're good on their own. Now you can kind of casually, trivially play a 5/5 space for 2, which is
and Storm is like Storm where you're like playing. You're trying to do a whole bunch of stuff in a single turn. That is something people have fun with, even when it's not a good strategy. Like look in Dominion, the card game. People love their village strategies when they don't go anywhere. And like
+1 draw, +1 action, man. Doesn't have to win. Just play until everybody gets up to go get more pizza, and then you win. But
yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'm excited to see how it develops, but I wish that there was a stronger mechanical theme in Spark for Yellow.
This is why I think we gotta, assuming they let us have another dev, which is an
pretty
assumption.
Please.
I think every time we get a dev on, we have to ask them, who's the color, who's defending this color? Who's advocating for this color, this aspect? We know Ryan said that's not how they do it, but who's defending?
Somebody needs to advocate for every color pair. It doesn't have to be a whole human being, but like somebody needs to say like this, somebody on the dev team needs to be, this is my favorite color pair and I want it to have cool stuff.
Or it's not my favorite, but I've been tasked with, I'm getting paid money in a paycheck to ensure that there is cool stuff because, I mean, Yellow doesn't quite do it for me, but I wish it did because, and I think that's maybe I don't have a theme to hook on to because there's so many cool cards in there. I'm optimistic about Shadows because...
That's the problem is there's a bunch of cool cards. When I looked at Heroes of Yellow, I keep being drawn back there because I love those characters, but there's not enough there yet for me to really... Because I'm a horrible Johnny, right? Like I love playing these. Like I want to do a thing. Give me a thing to do, and I will build a deck to do the thing. I do not like a deck where it's just like these are all good cards. So like Ezra, the Insurgent, whatever, the 2/4 with raid and sabotage. Like that's a good card, right? Like if you're doing like an aggro-y mid-range deck, that's a good card. Ezra's a good card in like an aggro-y mid-range deck, but there's not.
But what is
to
it
what end?
Of? Right. Yeah.
You
want a mechanic to hang your hook on. Okay.
Yeah.
New topic.
Yes.
I want to talk briefly, and this is going to make me an old, But I want to talk briefly about the 3D printing revolution, because it's been 10 years that we've been watching this play out, but this is the first time where it's really kind of, for me, hit home. So you have these game-genic tokens, which, unlike Spark of Rebellion, were allocated basically day one. Day one, if you had not pre-ordered game-genic tokens, if you waited too long to pre-order them, you did not get them. They were gone. And everybody's like, oh, this is a bungling. This is a, I strong disagree, because the marginal return on token packages is real close to zero. Like, how much is a box of Spark of Rebellion worth? It's MSRP 119, 120. Great. Yeah. But if you have one box of Spark of Rebellion, do you want a second one? Yeah. Do you want, even when they were easily available at MSRP, do you want a third one? Probably.
Yeah, sure,
Depends
yeah.
on how much you like opening packs. Like, so there are very mercenary people who believe in singles who host podcasts with me who maybe don't, but but most people, I think, like opening the joy of finding packs, the lottery ticket aspect, enough for a third box. Fourth box is generally where I think a lot of people will pivot to singles, but the marginal return on a fifth box is non-zero. If you offered it to me for $60, for $90, I'd take it, right? There's value there.
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
not $120 value. If I own a token set for the game, what is the marginal return of another token set?
It's not zero, but it's real low, right?
Real
like,
close,
like
right?
you want
Like,
one
how
for
many
yourself. Yeah, you want one for like maybe your kid or your spouse or whoever. But
and a third set, like, right? How many epic action tokens do you need? And so they can print too many boxes of cards, and people will buy them. They might not make the margins they want, but people will buy them. You print too many tokens, they won't buy them. Like, it doesn't matter if they knock them down to half price. I don't need a fifth token set. So I get why they were conservative with the game-genic tokens. But in response, the market shows up. And I have the laser gaming tokens, which, I think they're superior to the game-genic tokens for a number of reasons. 3 damage value is really nice. Double-sided is really nice. Something hits my base. The flip from 1 to 3, so you take 2 damage. Yeah, there you go. You take, it's awesome. I love their tokens. They're really fantastic quality, and they've just been able to like step up and fill a void that doesn't exist, which is great. But going a step further, what's really, they're off in England somewhere just like churning these things out. But the thing that blows my mind is I now have 3D printed inserts from the Artificery.
I saw you with those at the local, and I coveted that.
Oh, man, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's a 3D printed insert that goes in the Game-Genic deck pod, not to hold the Game-Genic tokens, which feels obvious, but to hold the laser gaming tokens. And I have first off the line for the laser gaming, and they're incredible. It's just like, oh, I need a thing, just pop it out. Really well designed, strong recommend. But it blows my mind. I hope I'm not saying too much to say the person who is selling these inserts is making money from this. There is profit. We exist in a world where you can 3D print, not for funsies, not like for yourself, but for mass consumption by the world, a adapter from one product to another 3D printed product, right? Like a niche gaming product. It's incredibly tailored to do one very specific thing. You are a person who owns a game-genic deck pod, right? So you're already narrow in the TCG space. Narrower still, you are buying game-genic accessories, specifically the pods that have the drawer.
Yeah.
You've also bought this 3D printed token set from another continent, if you're me, and yet you can then procure an insert to hold those tokens in that pod. Like, this is the first time I've just felt like oh, 3D printing is cool to like kind of overwhelmed by the level of which the future is now, old man, right? Where it's like, oh, just, I mean, obviously there are further steps where why am I not just casually 3D printing this for myself? Why, like, can I ask an AI to just like, here's two things, make a thing to make them combine and touch and, connect. But like, this is the first time. That's my note is wow. And also just go buy so many great 3D printed accessories for SWU, But I'm sorry, shout out to Laser Gaming. Yeah. They're competing with a subsidiary of Asmodee, and I think making a superior product for a better price. That's nuts. That's absolutely crazy. Speaking of threes, Ned.
I love the 3 damage when you're out of cards mechanic. Like, I have the fact that you can like struggle on, but you're not just like in a dead game state, I think is beautiful. I really like it as a payoff. I think that it works perfectly to be like a hindrance, but not so much that the game is immediately over. Like dying just because you run out of cards is a real bummer. And I think it's a perfect compromise. Shout out to whoever came up with that. Also, the deck size, I think, is great. So one of the big challenges about a lot of other TCGs is that the deck sizes are very large relative to the number of cards that you see. But in SWU, like, frequently you are seeing a good percentage of your deck, even without playing a lot of, like, draw fixing or cantrip or, like...
Part of that's the draw, too, right? Your deck is functionally half the size. It's a 25-card deck.
Right.
I hate the 3 damage. I mean, I respect it. It's good game design.
Yeah.
But I spent the first 6 weeks of Sparker Rebellion on the Ida Inversio train. And the number of times that I stabilized and lost, where the game was mine if I had infinite turns, and then died to... It's a good game design. I agree completely. Yeah. It's tuned just right. 4 would essentially be an auto loss. I don't think 2 is fast enough.
Yeah. But the fact that the deck size is relevant so that like you get to the mill condition without somebody aggressively milling you, I think is beautiful. And
especially in limited.
Yeah. Like I remember first night opening night pre-release, I had Palpatine and I decked myself from just like card draw effects because I'm that person.
You have to relearn, right? There's so many assumptions from other TCGs.
Yes.
I love it because I think mill as a constructed viable end game is, don't at me, but generally perceived to be somewhat unfun because you're playing, as you said, orthogonally to the way the game is meant to be played.
Yes.
It's something, it doesn't matter what they do or play, you're just winning.
It's burn, but to a thing that you generally don't get to improve outside of including very specific cards, right? So you can get to recursion and so forth, but without doing the whole episode, it's generally an unfun play pattern. But by making it totally viable, I think it was Jeremy Zorn at the Minnesota content creator thing played Vigilance for 8, like just entirely out of aspect, which in limited is probably worth it, right? And proved it. And one, it's D House from the Unplayables who documented basically this crushing defeat where he had the game, and like mill becomes like a left field limited. So it's great.
It's very tight. It's very well designed. New topic.
Yes.
I want to ask you, Ned, about... I don't have a lot of notes on this one. It's just the future of zones. And this one might actually end up meriting a full episode, but I need you to write it. So we've gone from, resources as just a thing.
Right.
To a zone. Essentially,
right.
I mean, the rules always define them as a zone.
Sure,
but we went from it. You just put them down; they didn't matter. You had people asking questions on Discord and Reddit, like, "Would it be okay if I just set the cards aside and then played lands, or if I had tokens for my number?" And like, it's hard to argue against that in Sparker Rebellion. Like, it was a number that went up and down.
Right.
And now in Shadows, obviously, that's a terrible idea. You need to very specifically keep track of your exhausted and unexhausted
No,
cards, and
yes.
all of these things. Which, side note, I think is going to be a logistical mess. I think there are people who are good at this and play a lot of TCGs who are going to have a great time with Smuggle. I think there's a lot of people who are just used to a cluttered play space, and they're going to have to get good.
It's gonna, like, you have to be really tight about my hand. When I am not holding it in my hand, goes over here, and my resources are right here, and when I'm looking at my resources, my cards in my hand must be over here, right?
Yeah, I am already really big on, whenever I'm like digging, because I love digging effects, saying, and I'm placing my hand here, like in case my opponent's not quite paying attention, like these 3 face down cards up here, this is my hand.
This is my
hand.
Yeah.
No, so you're going to be looking at your resources a lot, and nobody's going to do it poker style where you're just like, you're like, people are going to be considering options with a full hand, right? You're not just,
well, people better get used to doing it with the poker style, because otherwise.
Well, but but then on top of it, you've got, essentially, you got to keep track of now. It's very important to keep track of which resources are exhausted and which are not.
Yes.
So you've got 2 resource piles at least. That's going to be a bit of a mess. But the broader Tapas topic is, so we've added a zone, and you and I have talked about zones, but I kind of wonder, like, we're also seeing recursion, which changes discard pile into a zone.
And there was already some recursion in the base set with Home 1 and with
Home 1 and so forth.
Whatever, the Snowspeeder, the one Snowspeeder.
And there's like restock, like so it absolutely exists. But and then you start thinking, can I play cards out of it? You've got Kylo's ship, I forget what it's called. His TIE silencer. Yeah. It's not called anything. It's just Kylo's TIE silencer. Does that one have a problem? I don't know why I'm asking you, Ned. Now I got to find out if Kylo's TIE silencer has it can't have a problematic name. It's a Disney property. The same way it's Fett's fire spray, right? Like the ship should have a name, or do silencers not get names? Anyways, getting a field.
Yeah.
But I was looking at a Magic discussion on Twitter a week or 2 ago, and just noticing, like, there are a lot of zones now, and you've got the Monarch zone and the Command zone, and and I was, I don't know, have a lot to say, but I'm just curious, like, we've got to assume there are more card types coming. Yeah. Do they go into just the main? You're making a face, Ned, for our dear audio-based dear listeners. I think that there are probably more
card types. I don't know how many more you want, because the challenge about doing additional card types is that every time you introduce a new card type, you are creating possible bad rules interactions, or you're like invalidating cards, right? So let's imagine this was a problem that Magic had with Planeswalkers, right? When Planeswalkers got introduced, a bunch of removal, they hot fixed it by saying anything that can target your opponent's face can also target their Planeswalkers. But then there was this whole issue about, now you have to print Planeswalker on a bunch of cards and it takes up space and yada, yada, yada. And there's all this stuff. So in general, I feel like as a game designer, one must be hesitant to introduce new card types. I could see, like...
All right, well, following that through, I think, I agree. Sure, it's hard. Zero sympathy. Boo-hoo, you're designing cards professionally. But as hard as it is, one, I'd be curious to know how long a set goes on, like a game goes on before, like, what's the record for, number of cards created before introducing new card type, or number of sets, or number of months, however you want them, years. But, every FFG set has added essentially new card types, right? Like, you've got, or very close to. Don't at me with a technicality, but like a lot of times they will, like, I don't know. Like, I remember lengthy conversations where their currents really functioned as a new card type.
I mean, they kind of did, right? Like, they technically were kind of a new. They were a new area interaction, yada yada yada.
Right. But so Game of Thrones added a fair number of new card types. Yeah. Marvel Champions, by virtue of being a solo game, regularly adds new card types. So, but I mean, Runeterra, Hearthstone, like it happens, right? Like
Yeah.
you have this idea now. Well, now we're going to add landmarks, or we're going to do,
Yep.
whatever. It's plenty of those. So one, I think it's just an inevitability that there are new card types
Sure.
because it seems to always be done.
Yeah.
Two, Dengar. And as a reminder, Dengar triggers in Shadows off of playing an upgrade on a unit.
Mm-hmm.
Very specifically, unlike other cards that trigger when you play an upgrade,
Mm-hmm.
Dengar triggers when you play an upgrade on a unit. Now,
Yes.
the templating in Spark of Rebellion has been quite good. It has not been flawless, but it has been quite good. My natural inclination, there's a kind of theory in law that all words are added to statutes with intention.
Yes.
If a word's there, it legally is never by accident. It is always assumed that the law, if they put a comma in, they did so intentionally. You have to assume with intentionality. I treat the comprehensive rules the same way. If the developers, Ryan, chief among them, put words in there, it's because the words mean something. If they put words on cards, it's because the words mean something. And mistakes happen, but then they acknowledge them and fix it. But until I hear otherwise, I have to assume that the phrase on a unit, on Dengar, was done intentionally, which means, in the absence, that you could, in theory, have a unit or an upgrade played on something that is not a unit.
Yes.
And that qualifier means something, right? So, yeah.
No, I think
mean,
upgrades on bases is like a natural progression, right? Like upgrades on bases can define like the equivalent of the enchantment effects or artifact effects in Magic, where they are effects that are either continuous or they have like a broader scope than beyond just a single unit. Yeah.
This is a careful what I wish for thing, Ned, but I
Yeah.
miss those so much. I want those so badly. I mean, the fact that everything in Star Wars Unlimited is attackable
Yes.
is like runs very counter to how I play card games. I want a
think that
dirtle,
Yeah.
and I like tokens because they go wide, and I like enchantments. Spoiler alert: my favorite Magic decks are just big fat elf decks, like green, white, lots of tokens, lots of enchantments. Lots of cards that get +1/+1 for each enchantment or other. I just want to make a morass. But so I'm terrified that like a card like that might make the game bad, right? Like if you have cards that can't be attacked that have effects.
My guess is that they will make them attackable, right? Like this is my guess, right? Like if it's an upgrade on a base, there's enough cards that deal with upgrades that you can probably be okay with that. Right, like
Okay, so you're something akin to, not to get too theory crafty, but like you're saying like the upgrade has 3 damage, and rather than
potentially, or you can have like you just have an upgrade on a base, and it's attackable by like conventional means, not like you turn a unit sideways to attack it, but in the sense that there are enough cards that deal with upgrades that having upgrades on a base isn't necessarily more meaningful. I could also see them having like upgrades on a base that are attackable. Or like card types, like upgrades that go in the unit area that are attackable. Because I think that putting things on the grid, making things attackable, adds a huge amount of interaction, which is one of the key things, is that you want things to be interactable. And you want to have like the interactions have interactions, and then you get the whole like worlds of game design. But the other question that you had that was kind of the launch into this was zones. And I know that we spent probably, this is a meatier plate of tapas than a lot of the others.
Yeah, this is the good value one.
They have introduced a new zone already, and that is capture cards, right? Like the captured cards go underneath. Like they are kind of on the in an arena, but they're also not really. They're kind of there, but not, right?
Right. They're not in the arena by virtue they can't be targeted. They don't count. They don't count for Akbar, right? Like you don't get to count your opponent's cards for Akbar, so they're not in the arena.
Right.
They're in a special capture zone.
Right, they are in. So a new zone has already been introduced, and I imagine that going forward, there will probably be ways to get rid of units in the style of capture that are like super kill. Like there is a tendency as games go on for units to acquire the on defeat text, and then like
Or
think
worse,
of-
somebody might try to recur cards.
Right.
Ugh.
It's a monster. But like imagine when you are facing down K2SO, right? How many times have you said, I wish I could kill this in a way that didn't trigger its on defeat text? And right now the ways you can do that is you can waylay it or some other like bounce effect, because that gets it kind of gets rid
Or
of it
force
temporarily.
lightning. That's it.
Yeah, or force lightning, right? But I can imagine that like as more K2SOs proliferate, the desire to include like super kill effects, or as more recursion proliferates, the idea of including
Please
super
remove
kill effects.
K2SO from this game. I'm not killing
Right.
it. I'm just taking it out of play.
Right, and then there's this natural evolution about like, okay, well, we've got this super kill zone, like let's do some
So
stuff.
spoiler
with the
alerts
Yeah.
for Rebels, for anybody who wishes to watch Rebels and is not current. And Ned, I'm going to spoil all of Star Wars for you.
Go
because
for
we're
it,
on a
dude.
Star
Go
Wars
for it.
podcast.
110%.
I'm sure Legends had it, but Rebels has Ahsoka traveling through time by way of force portals. So we have time travel, not
Yeah.
counting I know you're a physicist and all FTL is time travel, Ned, but like actual what normal people consider time travel.
Honest to
time
goodness,
travel.
the time machine time
Honest
travel.
to goodness,
Yeah.
you go into a portal and you come out later, and
Sure.
it's the
Yeah.
last, not Last Starfighter, Flight of the Navigator style.
Flight of the
She just
Navigator. Oh, yeah.
emerges.
Yeah.
And she just emerges in time, and that one's actually about FTL, so that's a terrible example. But that leads to things like time counters, where or whatever.
Yeah.
You put, we could remove a unit.
You
for
know,
some
yeah,
amount of
it's often
time.
this zone where it's like waiting to come in, or you could have like a carbonite freezing mechanic where like they're removed from the game temporarily and they're in some carbonite zone, and
And then we
Yeah.
get to talk in that slightly nasally voice about why No Good to Me Dead doesn't, shows.
why
picture of
doesn't
person
No
in
Good to Me
carbonite.
Dead put things in carbonite? Because it's representing the putting of things in carbonite, but it doesn't put carbonite counters on things, and so I demand.
Yep. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for salvaging my.
No, I think it's a good
zones
topic,
question.
and I think that we should flesh it out. But I think that we have gnawed on this bone enough, and I'm going to move on.
New topic.
Yes, alternating actions. I love them. I can't get enough. The fact that like there's so many affordances that feel really strong about this. So one thing that occurred to me when I was playing a game is if you've got a big small army, you have this like slow kind of ponderous feeling of your opponent being able to kind of pick you apart for you to get the damage in. Whereas if you have like a single super powerful unit, you just hit them in the face, right? Like they can't interact. It gets that feeling natively without a lot going on. You get the like levels of stack interaction you have that you get in like higher level Magic play with certain decks. That is beautiful.
And
where,
yet,
yeah,
with no rules for it. Just
no rules
I
for
go,
it.
you go, I go. Yeah, it's great.
It's great. Huge
It
props.
does, a huge
Solves
props.
the
It does
first
go back to our 55-minute conversation though, because it always feels surprising because it makes the game feel so clippy. But
Yeah.
like those decisions are still decisions and they still take time.
Yeah.
And so it's like for me, every time I play, I'm sitting at those banquet tables and I'm like, okay, that game was like 6 minutes, 8 minutes. I turn around, 22 minutes. I'm like, how did that happen? Like, and
Yeah.
so but it makes the game feel so fast.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Solves the first
New
player
topic.
problem too, where you don't
no.
you don't have like as big of
Yeah.
a first player advantage. Huge. Anyway, I could. We already
Yeah,
did an
no.
episode on it.
I'm
Yeah.
curious
Yeah.
to see analysis of, maybe we do it. Is there in theory, there's always a first player advantage, but there really isn't. I am regularly just perfectly happy going second. Like,
Yeah.
because arena dodging, if I have choices, I want to go second because I want
Yeah.
to make you commit to a lane so that I can play my defense. I have a restored arc and a battlefield marine. You pick a lane. I don't want to pick a lane.
Yeah.
You know,
And playing
So-
GI, like I am always the last person to go. Like I never claim initiative. Because
Right,
I'm
'cause you
spending like 3 actions like, okay, well, I'm going to stand my guy, I'm going to ready my guy, and then I'll attack, and then...
my understanding was Destiny got a little degenerate with action compression, but that is something that I wonder about. I mean, it makes the game great, but there's definitely like a lot of really telegraphed moves that, And again, like you said, it gets that stack of, well, you can't just ready an attack. You have to ready.
Yep.
Then I get to do my thing, which maybe, like say,
Right.
play entrenched on Seventh Sister, like after you've already
Boy,
done
that was
damage
that was
to
a strong play. Yeah.
Man, I want more. I'm so excited about more Sentinel and Shadows and Overwhelmed because there's just so many more reasons to play Entrenched. I can't wait to Entrenched Moff Gideon. I'm very excited about that one. New topic.
Yes.
I am impatient. I wrote down in the Google Drive for our script excited, but I am impatient for a mature content creator ecosystem. And by mature, I don't mean boobies. I mean, like right now, I adore the Star Wars Unlimited content creator ecosystem. I adore the people in it, the personalities in it. It is a shallow pool of content, and that's not a criticism. That's a reflection on the nature of the game.
Yeah.
And how long the game has been out. So many great YouTube channels, good podcasts. And what it is here is two people playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Here is one person explaining a deck, a premier deck, or here is some number of dudes, overwhelmingly dudes, sitting around and chatting. You and I are.
I was gonna say like you're shooting
Glass
yourself in the
houses,
foot here.
Ned.
Yeah.
But I compare it. I mean, the YouTube algorithm is not great at identifying that I'm very interested in one specific TCG and regularly throws videos of other TCGs. Same with Twitter at me. And like, there's not a lot of room right now for a Twin Suns deck tech.
No.
Right. Just because you take your two heroes, and congratulations, you take the good cards.
Yeah.
Like you get 3 aspect pairings to pick from. Good luck. Like how many? You have all of green, blue, and red heroism in front of you. You can find 50 singletons pretty easy. Shadows though, doubles. Then in Twilight, now we're in the 80, but also that's a third set. I'm excited to see people start to argue that here's how 2 different Luke, right? So or Han, right? So we're gonna have 2 Han Solos. That's not a secret. We haven't seen Red Han, but we've seen a picture of Red Han on official. And by the time I've seen, dear listener, there's a good chance you've seen Red Han in the future. I want to see people argue about Han decks. That, well, here's how you build Han as a mid-range versus here's how you. Right now there's no ability to discuss that.
Yeah.
So like more formats. I want to. I get so excited when I see videos push like limited breakdowns are great. I really have been appreciating the master class, which I mean is technically just a deck tech, but like a exhaustive interview by Late Night Gaming of not here's 15 minutes, here's this deck, like and subscribe, which I watch those are good.
Sure. Yeah.
More exhaustive. I'm excited to see I'm ready for there to be enough going on that one channel can't talk about all of it, because I think right now a channel, if you are an aggressive content creator, like the big names, we all know who they are, you can kind of talk about all of Star Wars Unlimited. Like you can hit the high tournaments, you can mention Twin Suns, you can do a deck of the week deck tech, and boom, and then you record 2 of your games, boom, done. You've covered everything there is to cover about Star Wars Unlimited in that week, and I am excited for the community to grow to a point where you can't, and so that in order to distinguish themselves, people have to rely on more personality, get weird. I'm optimistic. That feels negative, but it is genuinely a place of hope and excitement.
I think it'll
New
get
topic.
there. It's just patience. All right. So A podcast that I used to listen to back in the day, and I have forgotten which one it was because I have listened to a lot of podcasts. And this again is dating me aggressively, but back in the day, Tarmogoyf used to be a really premium Magic card, and the price of Tarmogoyf was very high, where it was running on the order of like $100 for I'm going to use the term goyf. It was like $100 for a goyf, and a lot of, or it was a significant fraction of a modern deck was that you ran 4 Tarmogoyfs. And so they did what was called Goyf Watch, where they basically put a line and they said, do you think that the price of Tarmogoyf is going to exceed this value or not? And part of the reason why they did that was that this was around the time of the first printing of Modern Masters, I believe. And so there was this huge surge of new supply. And so the idea was that there's this counterbalancing effect. On the one hand, you have huge supply, a lot more Goyfs are in the environment. On the other hand, a lot of people are going to become interested in the format, and so there's going to be a lot more people wanting to have Tarmogoyfs in their deck. And so, like, which way is it going to fall? And now it's kind of irrelevant because Tarmogoyf isn't a card. But when I think of a...
How do you feel about the fact that Tarmogoyf is a token?
I feel like I'm a million years old. Like I have drunk from the
You
false
can just make
grail.
it as a token. They're free.
Yeah, no, it's Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. I grab like the jeweled chalice, I chug it, and then I'm withering right in front of you.
So I saw. I mean, I don't follow Magic that closely, but
Yeah.
I saw recently that there's the Modern Horizons 3 has Tarmogoyf tokens, and when you put Goyf on the list, I was like, oh man, Ned's old. I mean,
I'm old.
I'm older
yeah.
than you, but like
it sneaks up on you. But on the subject of large green creatures that see substantial amounts of play and have very high prices, Parker, do you think that the release of Shadows is going to drive the price of Vader down?
Yes,
I don't want to turn
absolutely.
into like a finance person. Like I hear you say,
no,
like,
go. Actually, strong recommend for Mike over on Unplayables. Has done his. They don't come out often enough, and I think that's probably because there's an element of such short supply right now makes it feel awkward to talk about. Like you either have or don't. But those are great finance podcasts. So sorry, ask the question again about Vader.
do you think that the release of Shadows is going to drive the price of Vader up or down?
Down.
Yeah. So if we set the line at like $70, right? Where if we say that like right now the Vader like TCG mid is something like 65, 7, like getting close to $70. I feel like there is a non-zero chance, and I'm happy to be wrong, that the release of Shadows is going to drive enough new people in, and there will be enough decks that will want to play Vader that even though there are more possible decks that you can play, the total supply of Vaders is still constrained enough that the price is going to go up. And
Strong disagree.
I'm hopeful otherwise. Yeah. So take your take.
Let's wager a pack on this, Ned. And,
Okay, I'm happy to wager a pack on this.
We'll open it on. Let's say, I don't know. End of July.
End of July sounds good. Yep.
Is Vader
31st.
above or below 70? And here's my argument against. And
Okay.
my argument is one word. It's mall. And the reason why I say that is because Vader is good.
Yes.
But what he really is a pushed green villainy ground finisher.
Yeah, he's a big top end guy, but he puts a lot of stats into play, right? Like he is not just a big ambush guy. He puts a lot of stats into play.
He puts a lot of stats into play.
Yeah.
But he is, and he's very good, but he's often answerable, right? Like
Yes.
because he only hits for 5. So
Yeah.
a lot of times I feel like people make the kind of trades where they kill something for 5 and then they're left with a 5/3
Yep.
plus whatever it brought in.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you brought in a cell block
Cell
guard,
block
you've got a
guard.
3/3
Yeah.
sentinel.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a lot of stats, but time and time again, we've seen that resources for stats alone are not usually what gets you the game, right?
No.
And so what he ends up being is a lot of stats plus a 5 attack.
Yeah.
compare to
Maul.
who is an ambush as well for the same
Yep.
cost in the same colors.
Yep.
Green villainy, and this is Tapas. We can talk about previews. Ambush, overwhelm,
Yep.
and he's a 7/6 who cannot take damage on the attack. He's invincible on the
If you
attack.
control an underworld unit, if you control
Yeah.
another underworld
Yeah,
unit,
sure. Absolutely. But a lot of decks right now that are in green villainy, I mean, there's enough other underworld units, right? Like, I don't think you're right that there's but it's just a better unit for a good chunk of decks because you end up at the end now with a 7/6 overwhelm, right? Like, and you could run it into something that does 10 back, and dump all 10 of those onto some cartel, a crafty smuggler, right? Boba Green, like one of the dominant decks of our archetype, runs Vader, but just put in Maul. But specifically, Maul's available at rare.
Yes.
And so you look at people asking, well, what can I sub in for Vader? And the answer is often there's not a lot, right? Like
there's just not, right? Like 97th Legion that does not do a comparable similar effect. Yeah.
Right. I mean and so whereas I think Maul for a lot of villainy decks in a format that is so dominated by the underworld trait, right? Will easily find. I mean, even if you have to run Maul and you're in an underworld heavy deck and you don't have enough. You don't have any underworlds out. You're playing him on an empty board state. That's still 7/6 overwhelm ambush, right? Like 7 damage is more than 5, and so I think Vader will still be premium, but I also think by the time, let's say, we get to the end of July, we are August, September, October, maybe all of November, up to 4 months. Jim Cartwright said, by the holidays. Let's say that means Christmas.
That means
feels
Christmas,
hedgy
right.
to me.
Yeah.
That feels like desperate phone calls to get whatever time they can get from printing, and they have commitments with buffer by the holidays. But they're printing in the United States. It would not shock me if they can get the Spark of Rebellion reprints out in October. Like that would not shock me at all. Before Thanksgiving would not shock me. And again, I don't buy and sell cards, but there's some amount of people buying them with the intention of like selling them, right? Like hoping to make money. Like that's how all TCG player works, is people are hoping to make money. And I would not feel confident that close to reprints. So I think the combination of good, viable alternatives, right? That a lot of the decks that run Vader right now, and who knows in the future, but a lot of the decks that run Vader right now don't really want to run Vader. He doesn't do what they want to do. Like a lot of health and stats is not what they want to push damage. Overwhelm 7, that's a lot.
That can be a lot of damage going through. That's the ECL'd in what are the 5/5 where it gets +2/+2 if you control your leader with overwhelm.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to figure out the steadfast battalion, right? Like, that's the substitute for So I just think there's between alternatives, the fact that the decks that are currently running Vader don't always want to do what Vader does, and the like looming reprints by the time we get into Shadows mean that it's already. I mean, Vader's like is dropped down to around 70 something recently. I think he's going. So yeah, we'll find out.
We'll find out.
End of July, one of us is opening a pack on stream paid for by the other person.
Absolutely. All right, Parker.
My new topic. Speaking of which, this one's easy. We'll go real fast. Supply sucks.
Yeah.
Man, like, I don't have a lot more to say, but having people who want to play the game and wanting to play the game, and people willing to spend money to play the game who can't play the game because the cards aren't out there and aren't coming out for like 6 months. 6 months in this day and age feels eternal.
It's a long time, right? Like,
and that's not critical of Fantasy Flight. The last time I was doing this with randomized packs and stuff, I don't know, just like I feel like my life is dominated by two polarities. There's Kickstarter board games that will come one day, maybe 2027. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't care. They magically show up on my doorstep. And like video games, where it's like, oh yeah, the game's broken. 2 days later, fixed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that it's like people want to play in March and they can't, and we will get you cards by Christmas. It's like,
Yeah. No, it's
sucks.
tough. So yeah, shout out to Guardian Games for holding enough limited product to be able to run limited events.
I heard a rumor
A rumor.
that at the most recent draft, though, like half the people bounced after drafting. Like they didn't play. Like they rare drafted and got out. And which just like boggles my. I get why you
That's
might rare draft.
wild. That's so rude.
You would have to draft so aggressively for your missing
Yeah.
collection to make like an unplayable deck. Like
Yeah.
we've all. I assume everybody has grabbed the rare or legendary they don't have. That's not
Yeah.
fitting their deck to take home.
Yeah.
But to like do that so aggressively that you can't play. But yeah, no. I was at limited. We were at a premiere on Thursday, and like, man, it was like 40 people the last time I was there for premiere, and it was like 12 or 13.
Yeah.
Nobody has cards. Sucks. That's it. All right, let's talk about something fun.
All right. Glup Shido. Are you familiar with the concept of Glup?
I am familiar. I've never heard his last name pronounced.
I'm
Shido.
trying to be more family friendly than an alternate
That's
pronunciation of Glup's last name, but like just to I'm sure that everybody has, but to explain, like Star Wars has a lot of very minor characters that people love for whatever reason. Like remember back when you're 8 years old and oh my God, Wicket, you know, Wicket is the universe. Everybody has their glups that they love and that you get irrationally excited about when they show up. So I'm going to share first. Who are the glups that I am most excited about seeing? The confirmed by Ryan Serrano showing up Dexter Jetster. I am pumped.
Not confirmed by Ryan.
100%. I'm the interview. I said confirmed by Ryan Serrano, and he did not contradict me.
Yeah, that feels like
Dexter
I can neither
Jetster.
confirm nor deny like that.
And Max Rebo of the Max Rebo band.
Max Rebo, I think, is one of my wife's favorite characters. So the problem is defining Glup Shido as a minor character.
Like semi-minor,
I mean, 'cause
right? Yeah.
For me, the characters I'm most excited to see are Young Jedi Adventures, but I think that is not me being funny. That is me being serious.
Deadly
These
serious. Okay. All right.
Deadly serious. Number one characters I want to see are Young Jedi Adventures. I adore them. I mean, obviously Nubs. Everybody loves Nubs, but there's, the Crimson Firehawk has quickly become my favorite ship in the Star Wars universe. It looks so cool flying around. Nobody in the Star Wars fandom, and by nobody I mean 4% of the Star Wars fandom, cares about Young Jedi Adventures. It's parents who love Star Wars and like completionist nerds, of which there are a non-trivial number in Star Wars.
Yes.
But also it's a lot of people are quick to Disney dismiss a TV show. So, on the one hand, that feels like that's my Glup Shido, but on the other hand, they're the lead characters of a canon TV show. So can they qualify?
I think they count as glups. I think that they're glup worthy.
They're Glup worthy.
I think they're glup worthy.
I think because barring that, I would have said either Cobb Vanth, who we've already had previewed, just this week, because I love me some Timothy Oliphant, and God, it's late at night. I'm sorry, dear listener, I'm blanking on her name. The mechanic from Mandalorian. It is way too late at night. I'm gonna put it in the comments. I'm sad, but I love seeing now. One of the things I've really enjoyed, Jack Black, right? Seeing famous actors make cameos in Star Wars because it's such a thing. any one of those, because those are cards that are like way more easy to get signed, right? Like
Yeah.
you're, you know, so that's why I was really excited to see Bo-Katan, because she lives in Portland, right? So or her family does. She doesn't anymore,
Right.
but there's a non-trivial chance of bumping her into her at the Baghdad and getting your cards signed by Bo-Katan.
Side question.
That's our new topics.
Sorry, one quick side question is and I'm counting on you to be my repository of canon here. Is KOTOR Knights of the Old Republic, is that canon or not?
It is not, Ned.
No.
Much to the chagrin of many. It's one of those things that's kind of like sneaking back in, because like the same way that Thrawn wasn't canon, then
Right.
But like all of that Legends material that a lot of nerds invested in, and then we're told eat it, nerds, it's not canon, but it is a rich vein of material to be mined for canon. And I think that's the thing that I love is when you go to Wikipedia for like the Gladiator Star Destroyer, or the Corvette, the one you played, the 4.6 that does 2 and 2 on enter. And
Ruthless Raider, Relentless Raider,
Ruthless
yeah.
Raider. There's a lot of these cards that exist in canon that were created by like Fantasy Flight, because
You need to
we
fill a
need
role.
a mid-sized ship for our X-Wing game. Hey, Lucasfilm, do you have one? Oh, no, you don't? Okay, well, we'll make one that looks like this, and now it's canon. I love that little circle, but so there's a lot of stuff that I think in the extended universe, which includes KOTOR, that they don't want to include. But they've mentioned like Darth Revan, like, but no, it is not canon, Ned. So
Okay, TK421. Yeah, I'll see you on the other side.
Great assassin droid.
No.
Yeah. All right, Ned. Last question for our topics. What is your real name?
My name is Monday.
My name is Monday. I'm a mathematician.
So, we're here. We have a lot of cards spoiled from the new set. So when we have a lot of new cards spoiled, that means that I have some work to do. And that is, let's take my regression and let's make it better. Because this is an evolving process, right? Like this is something, I'm not an oracle, right? Like I am doing a mathematical process on a set of cards and drawing conclusions. But just because I say something is true, or I believe that I have found a particular thing, that this is science in the purest form of I'm trying to discover things, and I am happy to be proven wrong. So one of the things,
because if you're proven wrong, that means new data.
Yes, absolutely. And like I know that there are some things now that are not as correct because we have more data and we can do more things. And so let's talk about it. So before I dive too deep into the weeds, is it worth me doing a reminder about how the regression works?
I will do a reminder of the regression works.
Okay.
And then you can just correct me. So
yes.
You take a list of all the stats.
Yep.
And their cost.
Yes.
And you essentially, using math, try to say, okay, here's what wing leader costs. It's a 2-1 for 3, but it's 4-3 worth of stats, whether you,
right, yeah,
those are both judgeable, but also looking at Battlefield Marine for a 2 cost, how many stats do we expect to see? And you do a little loop of reinforcement until you find a curve that most closely threads reality.
Yes. Yep.
And there's and again on the GitHub there's some zhuzhing of reality to reflect the fact that wing leader is not a 2-1.
Yes.
And we've talked in the past. It's mostly a 4-3, but not quite a 4-3 because what if you have nothing else to play and blah blah blah. But so we do some zhuzhing, or you do some zhuzhing. 97th Legion, it's a 7-7. That's what it might be more. You might have cheated it out and it's less, but it's a 7-7 as far as math, so that Ned can ask questions like, if a hypothetical card in the future, tomorrow's previews, for us, tomorrow's previews on Echo-based gaming, if they had shown a little image of the card cost, and then we're like, the card costs 5.
And it's a ground arena unit, therefore,
And the math we're working with until 2 minutes ago, Ned might correct me, is that you get some number of points and Ned has found that a power attack is worth twice as many abstract unit purchasing points as hit points. That a 1/4 and a 2/2, even though the 2/2 is 4 stats, and a 1/4 is 5 stats, that they are approximately the same amount of cost. Although we don't have a vanilla 1/4 or a vanilla 2/2 to prove that with.
We kind of do, like, Guardian of the Wills is effectively kind
How
of...
dare you? But but I think that goes to the
Yeah.
point, though, is that Ned Math does not currently, and we're getting there. And
Yeah.
maybe that's what tonight's about. I don't know, actually.
Not quite, but...
That it has to ignore the text
A
box
lot.
for the most part.
Yeah, a lot. Like, I care about some of the text box, and I have to care about some of the text box because the text box matters. So,
Right. But you know, regional governor, C-3PO, R2-D2, like all of the 1/4s.
they're all just 1/4s. Yep.
We're just asking how much stat you get. Obviously, Battlefield Marine is going to be the top end. You would expect vanilla cards, although Bounty's going to,
Right, yeah,
gonna throw that
we're
off.
getting there.
So. All right, I don't want to steal your episode, Ned. That's what regression
Yes,
is.
perfect. Exactly.
English major.
You did a great summary. I think 110%. The only thing that I will add is that this is a recursive process where I start off, I will use power and hit points to try and predict cost. And then once I feel like I have a pretty good handle on using power and hit points to predict cost, then I can turn around, I can turn that power and hit points into an adjusted total stats value. And then we can try and predict from cost the adjusted total stats value. And the reason for that is that because I'm using linear regression as my tool, linear regression requires that I have a single value that I am predicting. So I cannot predict both power and hit points at the same time. I could predict one or the other, but this is why we generate these adjusted total stats metrics so that I can go from cost to total stats.
Okay.
Because it makes
And then we find that, that makes sense, but also, according to Ned Math, other HP power combinations would make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So,
okay.
the first thing that I did was I'm having to use base stats. So the base stats means that we're treating Wing Leader as a 2/1 rather than as a larger unit. And the reason for that is I just haven't manually gone through and adjusted all the new spoiled cards. I need to do that. That's something I need to do, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So that is on my future work pile. It's doable.
We are all mortal, Ned.
Yeah, I also want to take another pass. I think that I definitely overvalued Taggy and Dodana in terms of, like, I considered them to always have, like, 2 other units that they cared about on the field, and I don't think that's empirically correct, right? Like, just playing the game, you generally see them with, like, 1 other unit on the field that they care about, so I need to do another pass through that. And that'll happen, when I do my next pass. So we do base stats for everything with the exception of 97th Legion because I have to manually adjust 97th Legion and pin it to a 7/7 because otherwise it is a huge outlier because its printed stats are 0/0 and it makes me sad. Right. So let's use our stat adjustments and see if these stat adjustments are still valid. So the stat adjustments are how many abstract cost points is power and hit points worth. And what I find is that if you add in the cards spoiled so far as of May 2nd, you get power being worth about 6/5. So you multiply by 6 and you divide by 5 of a hit point. So power is still worth more than a hit point, but it's not worth twice as much as a hit point anymore. And I think that this tracks with what Ryan said in their interview, where he said that we should expect that there will be more units that have a higher power printed than in the base set, mostly because they wanted units to stick around and it makes sense, yada, yada, yada. But we're seeing power be priced more comparably towards hit points. And I think that in terms of like these abstract cost points, and I think that it'll be interesting going forward into future sets how that's going to shake out. I think that power is worth more than hit points in general, but I think that there are a bunch of like key breakpoints, and a lot of those key breakpoints have to do a lot with like what other cards are in the set. So an example of that is like playing around with a lot of 2/3s and 3/2s and 2/2s, right? Like 2/3s are king in a world of 2/2s. If you consider like a 2/2 with shield, a 2/3, and a 3/2, right? Like a 2/2 with shield will trade into a 2/3 evenly, but it will kill a 3/2 and leave behind the body. You get all of these fun wrinkles in the math. So, like,
So
the
I just
price-
want to note, like,
yeah,
this is the power of science,
Right.
And that those words taste like ash in my mouth. But when the initial pass at Ned Math said 2-to-1 ish, there was, I think, some rebuttal, and
yeah,
and I thought we're pretty clear that this was descriptive, not prescriptive.
yes,
And this is, to be clear, Ned, is you are saying you stand by, right? Like that
Yeah.
in Spark of Rebellion.
yes. If you look at the Spark of Rebellion set and you are trying to predict based on the cards in Spark of Rebellion, if you show me a card in Spark of Rebellion with a certain power and a certain hit points, and I try and predict the cost, the best way to predict the cost is to multiply the power by 2 and add the hit points, and then that is your best
Compared to a
predictor
cost.
of cost. Right.
Right.
In
But
adding
more
in
and
the
more cards.
shadows, yeah, then the best predictor of cost turns out closer to 6/5 times power. And
Twilight or future Shadows, the
It can keep
remaining
adjusting it,
100-ish
right?
cards in Shadows could change again.
Right. And I think, that said, I still stand by that I think that power is worth more than hit points. I think the classic example that I point to is Jabba, which is a 2/8. Like, it's a lot of really raw stats on a person, but Jabba does not see a lot of play outside of my Grand Inquisitor yellow deck and occasionally Boba yellow, right? Like, it's theoretically got a lot of good stuff, but like the 2/8 is just not a stat line that you're excited about a lot of the time.
Right. Yep. Okay.
So
So
that's
is that
interesting.
is that Shadows pushing the value of power up?
Yes, that is shadows pushing the value of power up. Is that, or rather pulling the value of power down? Is that
Okay.
when we look at cards in shadows, there are a lot more cards in shadows that have relatively higher power to cost ratios. That implies that like the devs in shadows are pricing power closer towards 1-to-1 with hit points.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Next thing is let's add set as a regression term. So this is essentially, can I, not looking at anything else in the card other than the power, or sorry, the adjusted base stats and the arena and the set, can I predict cost? And this is like a lazy way of, can we see if there is a discontinuity in shadows? Because it could be that like shadows units are priced differently than spark units are. Like we could pretend that spark units are priced as like, these are kind of the generic base units and you're going to want to replace them with better units going forward.
So
Right.
this becomes kind of like a canary in the coal mine, though. That, I mean,
Yes,
you'll be able to say
power
for
creep.
set 5. Wow, for power creep, set 5.
Yeah.
There's just more stat points, and we can't figure out why.
Right, exactly.
They're
Yeah,
negative
so
keywords.
this is
like
a good
values.
good safety test for like, is there an obvious discontinuity in the regression? And what we find is that there is not a significant discontinuity. Like adding set as a variable doesn't seem to predict, which is actually really interesting because bounty units we expect to have better stats for their cost than other units, right? So
Yeah, which would push
it would push
because
it
you're not taking bounty into account.
in this pass, yeah.
Okay. Well, you would expect that there would be higher stats, and if there aren't,
then that implies that we've got smuggle counteracting because we expect that like smuggle units are slightly overcosted relative to their stats, and that was something that they talked about in the interview. Or there could be other stuff going on, right? Like the bounty value isn't being reflected in stats, but it's being reflected in like keywords, for example.
rectify for me
Yeah.
the discrepancy between you saying Shadow's stats
Yeah.
are different enough that it forces the adjusted stat point budget for power to go from almost 2-to-1 to 6/5.
To 1. Yeah.
And yet you're also saying set doesn't push adjusted stat points up and down. Is that after you've made the adjustment?
It's after I've done the adjustment.
Okay. So that's saying with the budget of assuming converting the adjusted stat
Yeah.
points
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, so the adjusted stat point budget has shifted,
Yes.
and you can see that shift because of
The inclusion of
shadows.
these cards. Yes.
But then once you apply that budget to the Spark of Rebellion cards and say, okay, we're going to recalculate the adjusted
Repredict.
stat points for all the cards using our new 6/5 ratio,
Yeah.
then the set does not push one way or the other.
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool.
So that
I
is,
track
you know, with this new ratio, if I was trying to predict which set a card came from, I could not meaningfully predict which set a card came from. And this is a good, lazy test, but I got a wild hair and I wanted to do a more rigorous test. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our t-test.
Okay.
So the
I don't know
t-test,
what that is.
this is a way of testing if two distributions are the same or different. So if we look at the error on our prediction, so we have our prediction. Our prediction is we're trying to predict cost from stats. Or actually, this is rather than cost from stats. This is stats from cost. We're trying to predict like adjusted stats from cost. What is our error? What is the error that we're seeing? And are we shooting like uniformly higher in one or lower in one? Is there a way that we can figure out like?
So this is saying I've
Yeah.
now created my formula,
Yeah.
and I'm mapping it to reality, and there's some amount of error because it doesn't
Yes.
perfectly map.
Yeah.
Okay?
And this is,
And now
are
you're
these
comparing...
two error distributions, I'm trying to like overlay these two error distributions, so I'm saying, are they significantly different? And what we find is that our in-sample mean error, so this is, we count shots above as positive and shots below as negative. Our mean error in sample, where we're training on pure Spark data. We're not training on the out of sample data. We're just the out of sample, the shadows data. We're just training on Spark data. If we're just training on Spark data, what we find is that we're well calibrated, is that our average error is basically 0. So we're missing above as below about as many times. We have a standard deviation of about 1.21, which, you know, I'd prefer it be better, but this is also like a really simple regression. I'm doing like a very simple linear regression for this test. When we take the fit that we did to Spark, and now we're going to apply it to shadows.
Okay. The 2/3 of shadows, yep.
Yeah, the 2/3 of shadows that we've seen. Our mean error creeps up. Our mean error is now not well calibrated at 0. It's 0.13. So our error is creeping up, and it's creeping up in a direction, but the standard deviation of the error is still about the same. It's 1.22. So basically we're saying we're not worse at predicting, but we are more biased in predicting. If we just are training off of the Spark cards and we're trying to predict the Shadows cards, then we are undershooting. And I think that tracks with what we saw with having to readjust the stats formula, and it's having to track with what we expect from Bounty, right? Is that we expect that Bounty is going to raise the expected average stats of cards in Spark because it is a keyword with the drawback, right? So now let's take that, and we are going to look again at the full data set. We're going to look at both Spark and what we've seen of Shadows so far. And we're going to add in a very hacky version of Bounty and Smuggle. And the reason why I'm saying a very hacky version is that a more rigorous version of Bounty and Smuggle, different bounties are different. Like Dr. Evans's bounty and Clone Deserter's bounty,
draw
they're
one
different.
Card.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Like
But you're just saying bounty is bounty.
Right, yeah. If it has the text bounty in it, it is a bounty card. If it has the text smuggle in it, and again, like smuggle, how much does the smuggle cost? Is it 1 above? Is it 2 above? Is it in aspect? Is it out of aspect? I'm just saying smuggle is smuggle.
Minus deal 4 damage to another unit, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah. Smuggle is smuggle. Does it have, can we predict bounty and smuggle? And what we see is that smuggle does not seem to be significant. And I think that this is there are a couple of cards that are very aggressively priced for smuggle. And these very aggressively priced for smuggle cards, I think like Night Owl, the 4/3 Mandalorian, is one of them. And then I'm trying to remember what the other one is, but there's like 2 cards that are...
Oh, and you've got like the new Millennium Falcon that is priced
yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the
just gets
Millennium Falcon
ambushed.
was the other one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So those 2 are pushed enough smuggle cards that they feel that they don't allow us to draw like significant conclusions, but the majority of smuggle cards are falling kind of below the line. But it's not significant enough to say anything about. But bounty is significant. And so going forward, I do have to be including bounty in my regressions, or else we will be more wrong. And this is with even a very hacky bounty, we see that bounty appears to be worth about 0.9 plus or minus 0.4 stat points. So that is between 1 hit point and 1 power worth of stat points for having bounty as a keyword. And this is only looking at stats, not looking at other things. So like Dr. Yvonne's, for example, is underweighted because that shield does a lot of work, right?
Well, but also, I mean, the shield does a lot of work, but also, like, untapping 12 resources is just worth 1 bounty, right?
Right.
Okay. So far, so the takeaway on this is,
Yeah.
Ned math is more accurate.
Yep.
There is no stat push, power creep.
No uniform stat push on Shadows versus Spark.
And how much would... So the nature of a TCG is I'm building my deck with 17 cards, right?
Right.
50 divided by 3. If there are 2 pushed, 3 or 4 pushed cards in a set in my aspect pairs, the rest of them being perfectly uniform to your line, the set could still have power creep.
Yes.
Because I just buy those 4 good cards, put them in my deck. Who cares? And I'm just slowly building a deck of the most pushed cards, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's realistic, right? Is that the way that I'm approaching this regression is that I'm approaching this regression from looking at all the cards and not just like the cards that are included. I think that if in decks, and I think that if you were to look at just the cards that are included in decks, you would find a more aggressive stat to cost ratio. Like, for example, I think Unit Boba is in a lot of decks, and Unit Boba is way above the curve in terms of, if depending on which way you define the curve, they have a lot of stats relative to cost, right? And a good ability. Yeah. And so if I were to look at like Unit Boba and Battlefield Marine, and if we go through like cards that appear,
but you compare to like
decks,
Super Laser Tech, which is a 2/1 for 3.
Right.
Although that's a good card too, because it's got a good ability.
But it's a good card.
So the takeaways are Ned math more accurate, but continues to be descriptive.
Yeah.
Set as a whole is not resulting in power creep.
Yes.
And we are seeing that
bounty is worth about a stat point. Between 1.5
stat point.
Yeah, between like anywhere between 1 hit point or 1 hit point and 1 power.
And we're not seeing yet any significant weirdness on smuggle.
Not yet, but I suspect that if we exclude the 2, like the couple of outliers, and it might be that like the couple of outliers are the definitive, like these are the smuggle cards that people include, and then the rest of the smuggle cards are limited cards. It might be that smuggle is not, Again, depending on the way that you define it. Right now, there are hints of significance that it, like the coefficient is coming out negative. That's saying that like smuggle costs you some amount of stat points, in the same way that like being in space costs you some amount of stat points. It's not a full stat point, but like being in space, typically you are about like, I don't know, a half a stat point worse than a comparable ground unit.
Okay.
But
and
like,
then
smuggle is
by
not
episode,
at that level, but it's close. Yeah, it's like
so by episode 32, Ned.
Yes.
The next Power of 2 episode, which is when I have signed you up to do another My Name is Monday.
Yes.
Will you know more?
Yes. One of the things that I really want to do, and I know matters, but I have not been able to do so far, is looking at keywords. is that whenever I have tried to regress with keywords, the issue is just that there's not a lot of units with keywords. And like, excuse me, it feels like there are a lot of units to keywords, but if you count like the number of units with overwhelm, it's not that many.
It's not enough to be statistically significant.
Significant, right? You know, like I saw some results from Shielded because Shielded is such a strong like stat poll. And there's probably interactions, and modeling those interactions is more complicated because like a shield on a 2/2 is different than a shield on like a 7/7, right? Like a 7/7 shielded unit is a 2/2 shielded unit. Like, you know, empirically we see Crafty Smuggler at 2 cost, and we see Dooku at 7 cost, and Dooku, you know, is a shield on a 7/7 worth more than a shield on a 2/2? I don't know. Maybe.
Right, yeah.
Probably.
Maybe. Okay.
So, but like
Crafty
overwhelm.
Smuggler, another card that if you're in Hero
Yeah.
has been strictly bettered, which I'm by Elite L337,
Yeah.
which I'm excited to play. Anyways,
But yeah.
all right.
That's the long and short of it.
Okay. And I believe that's all she wrote, dear listener. You may not have paid for this giant smorgasbord of small plates with a lot of money, but only with a lot of time. So thank you for sticking with us. Ned,
Yes.
do you have any takeaways?
I do. My takeaway is recording an episode after coming back from camping is a bold play, and I will strive not to have that happen again because I am feeling it.
That's a rough scene. Yeah. Well, we will be flexible because we are now recording every 2 to 3 weeks. So we got a little wiggle room there. Dear listener, we'll see you then.
Adios.